What's up, guys? This is Kephas. So, since I've been on YouTube, I have made a lot of class guides and macro guides for World of Warcraft, and one of the most common questions that I tend to get asked is which class do I think is the easiest to play, or which class would I have the simplest time playing and getting the most out of, some variation of that kind of question. And so I kind of wanted to try to finally answer that question today for, the current state of WoW, which all the classes we have, which class is the easiest to play. And I'm kind of focusing this around leveling up characters, because recently I've been leveling up all of my characters. I've got almost every class to 120 by now. I've certainly messed around a lot with all of the classes, and I think I've got a pretty good handle on which ones are easier to level up, which ones are easier to play, and which ones are more difficult. But keep in mind, this is more focused around solo content like leveling, world quests, that kind of stuff. When you're in dungeons, it can kind of skew simplicity just based on how much your team is helping you do things and that kind of stuff. And plus, I don't do a lot of group content these days anyways, so I'm mostly focusing around leveling up. Like, when you level up a new character, which class is going to be easier and which one is going to be more difficult. So that's kind of the idea here. And keep in mind, I'm one person. I have my, probably characters that I gravitate to more, characters that I understand better. So this is, take this all with a relative grain of salt in terms of how much you value my opinion. This is just my opinion, so if you have a better handle on classes that I don't, you might have a different opinion about this. And so, in order to be trendy, the way that we're going to do this is through a tier list, because that seems to be the thing right now, and it seems like it'd be kind of fun. So this is a tier list I'm using here. Someone has made off of this website. I don't know why they have two demon hunters on here. Probably whatever. It's fine. And so there is S, A, B, C, and D. And so the way I'm going to do this is S is the absolute best classes, the easiest of all to level up. And then we've got, the next to easiest, of course. And then we've got just a little bit above average with B. And then C is average, not great, not terrible. And then D is what I think is below average. So that's kind of how we're going to do this. Because honestly, most classes are pretty easy. They're all pretty straightforward, especially these days with the way classes have changed and with how easy it is to level up. It's not like you're going to have a particularly difficult time with any class. You should be able to level up with every class, but there are certainly differences from one class to another. And so to kind of get an understanding of that, I'm going to start with what I think is the absolute easiest class to level up in the game. In my mind, that is hands down the Paladin. I think the Paladin is by far the easiest class to level up in the game, because not only is it a plate wearer, which means it can take tons of damage, it's also able to heal, and it's got great healing. Even in Retribution, when you have like free flash of light procs that can almost top you off with just one. You've got Lay on Hands, you've got your bubbles, you've got Shield of Vengeance. You've got so many abilities and talents that can help keep you topped off that it rarely becomes a problem. I mean, in Ret Spec, I'm able to run into large packs of enemies and just mow them down without any difficulty. And if you want, you could always switch over to Prot, and then you could probably pull twice as many enemies. You might take a little bit longer to kill them, but it's a really easy spec to play, and it works out just fine in solo. So you've got options as a Paladin, and of course when you level up a Paladin, you have the choice of doing every role in the game. You've got DPS, tank, and healing, so Paladin is a great choice even for first timers. The rotations are very simple, it's pretty easy to understand, and it's very easy to play, and you're going to keep yourself alive. I mean, Paladins really do really well in solo content and in group content, but again, we're focusing on solo content. And I'm also, just to keep this in mind, I'm going to try to keep this kind of geared towards higher levels, because if you want my opinion, when it comes to leveling up characters, when it comes to lower levels, I'm talking like 1 to 60 or even 1 to 80, honestly, every class kind of sucks a little bit because, like, while it's easy, like, you know, in terms of, like, the questing, you level up really fast, it's easy to kill enemies, most classes aren't really fleshed out very much, so it's kind of slow. You're not doing a whole lot. It's kind of boring. So in that regard, like, every class is kind of lame, with the exception of monks, and that's mostly because monks get they get an ability, or every, like, day you can do a daily to get an extra hour where you get double experience. So you can get double XP. You can, like, stack that. So for a few days, you could just do that quest, log out, log in the next day, do it again, and, like, stack that for a long time. And that'll carry you, like, all the way up to, like, I forget if it's, like, 80 or something like that, or maybe even higher. I forget. But aside from that, low level kind of sucks for everybody. But as it gets into higher levels, like, especially into the current expansion when you're leveling up, Paladins are great. I never died. I didn't even come close to dying. I didn't even really have to look at my health ever. There were maybe a couple times where I got down when I was fighting the elite enemies, but yeah, I mean, I was having no trouble. Paladin was the one class which wasn't a pet class that I was able to take on wanted, like, group quest elite enemies at higher levels. Like, when you get to, like, 118 and 119 and the game starts to get really tough, Paladin, I was able to still do pretty much everything. So in my opinion, Paladins are by far the easiest and best class to level up and play in the game, and I may be a little biased, but that's just my experience. That's why I like playing Paladins. Now, there is another class I think that kind of rivals Paladins in terms of being easy to level up and easy to play, and that would be the Hunter. I think Hunter could also go in the S class. Now, I think Hunters might, in my opinion, be maybe a slight step down from Paladins. That's just my personal opinions. Like, if we had more ranks here and we had, like, an S plus class, I would put Paladins there, and then I would put Hunters in the S class. The reason why Hunters are so great and easy to level up, they've always been this way. Since the very beginning of the game, Hunters have always been a great beginner class, and that's because they come with a pet. They're a range class too, so, you know, you're at range, you can deal damage, you know, from the back, while your pet controls the enemies, and that makes it very easy to play a Hunter, especially these days, especially, like, compared to the old school days. Like, when you know, play a Hunter back in the old days, you had a lot of maintenance, and these days you don't have to worry about much. It's very easy to control your pet. Your pet can handle even multiple enemies at a time, and you're able to just kind of mow them down from the rear. So as a Hunter, you can do a lot. I was able to take on all the wanted, you know, enemies as a Hunter without any trouble. And so, like, I mean, I was able to just fly through the leveling process without really thinking much. I've already leveled up 2 Hunters in BFA. I've leveled up 3 Paladins and 2 Hunters, so take that for what it's worth, because they're, in my opinion, the easiest classes to play. So as a Hunter, you've got that pet. The only thing you got to worry about is sometimes, especially when you get into those higher levels, your pet, it seems to be a little less tanky, a little bit more squishy. It kind of goes down a little bit faster, so you really got to watch your pet's health and keep churning out those min pets, especially when you're taking on, like, large packs of enemies or an elite mob. You might have to watch it, so keep that in mind when you're playing a Hunter, but otherwise you're probably going to just, like, plow right through everything without any trouble. So those are the 2 classes that I think are the best. You've got a range class and you've got a melee class, and you can pretty much choose one of those 2 classes, and I don't think you'll have any trouble leveling up a character. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I'm going to share what I think is the worst class to level up in the game, and some people may disagree with this. I was a little bit surprised by it, but in my opinion, the worst class to level up is the Mage. That is the one class that I think will be below average. It was way worse, noticeably worse than every other class that I have leveled up, and that's been the case. Like, I mean, that was kind of an issue through most of the leveling process. The problem with mages are they're very weak in terms of just not being able to take any damage. They're called glass cannons, but I kind of felt like the cannon aspect of a mage wasn't really there. I mean, compared to a lot of other classes, I'm able to mow down enemies. I mean, on my Paladin, I was just shredding through enemies, and even a lot of other classes, I was having no trouble taking down enemies relatively fast. And then I'm playing my Mage, who can't take damage as well as anybody else, was also kind of slow. And I kind of felt like, you know, I was relatively slow. You know, they're very proc-based. You know, whether you're playing Frost or Fire, you know, you've got a lot of procs that you have to worry about. And when you're not procking, you're just doing a basic Fireball or Frostbolt, and it doesn't do very much damage. So as a mage, I felt like they were relatively weak in terms of trying to do solo content. I mean, taking on multiple enemies, like large packs, was out of the question. Taking on any elites was out of the question without someone else there. Mage is probably a better class to play. If you're going to level them up, it's probably good to try to do dungeons as much as possible. That way you've got people there to help. And then you can kind of do more damage. I mean, I'm not saying that mages are a bad class. There's a lot to enjoy about a mage. They have a lot of great things about them. I mean, you can conjure your own food, and then, you know, that way you can, in between, you know, enemies, you can eat up if you need to restore your health. You've got that going for you. But that's the thing, is there was a lot of downtime where I would have to sit down and eat. And I certainly died a lot, and a lot of that may just be that I'm not a very good mage player. But I still feel like, compared to every other class that I played, mage was by far the worst in terms of solo content and leveling up. They're really not fun to play in terms of that. It's kind of funny because I remember back in the day, mages were one of the best because you could play a Frost Mage and just pull lots of enemies and then AoE them down without any trouble. Nowadays, it doesn't seem like you can do that as well. So, in my opinion, Mage was definitely the worst. Even with like all the CC abilities that they have, it still felt kind of horrible. And I was leveling up as Frost because I've always known Frost to be the spec to play when you're leveling up, but at some point I switched to Fire, and I had a lot better time with that, and I think that's partially because, you know, I like Fire, and Fire has a lot of the same CC abilities that Frost has. It used to be that a lot of those abilities, like, you know, Ice Barrier, which, you know, will keep a shield on you, and then, you know, Frost, you know, Frozen Trap or whatever, the one where you freeze them on the ground, I can't remember the names, and, you know, those kind of abilities were specific to Frost. Nowadays, you know, as a Fire Mage, you have CC abilities there as well. So I personally preferred Fire. That did make it a little bit better, but I still felt like it was relatively weak. I was glad to be done with it and ready to move on to the next class. So those are what I think are the best and worst, and then everything else is kind of going to fit in the middle there. So let's talk about what I think are the, you know, just maybe a step below the Paladin and the Hunter, but really great classes if you want to level up. And those would be starting with Death Knights. Death Knights are definitely one of the stronger classes to play when you're soloing. You've got 3 specs, and they're all melee, but they're all really great. They're all really powerful. I actually leveled up as Blood because I wanted to do something different this time, and I was really interested in messing around with tank specs. And especially early on before the nerfs, Blood was really unstoppable. It was doing high damage and high self-healing, so you could just keep going really non-stop. You had all your abilities just, you know, dealing damage and also keeping you healed up, and it was just like you could just keep going like a lawnmower. It was crazy. It's been nerfed a little bit. It's a little bit slower now, but you still keep yourself topped off. It just feels like you're not doing as much damage. Still able to pull large packs of enemies and mow them down. I imagine you could have a relatively, maybe a little bit faster time. Maybe you got to watch your health a little bit more in other specs, especially like if you play Frost. But Frost is definitely the easiest spec I think to play as a Death Knight. But then if you want to like have a pet, you can do Unholy. So you have options, and it's really strong. I mean, it's really fun too, because every time you kill an enemy, your Death Grip ability can reset, and you're just pulling enemies towards you like Scorpion in Mortal Kombat. It's so much fun to play a Death Knight, I think, and it's really powerful. Even though you don't technically have healing abilities, you do have ways to keep yourself topped off. You've got a lot of good cooldowns to use. And, you know, overall, the rotations are very easy. So Death Knight's very strong. I'm not really going to take into consideration that you start at level 55, which is nice. You skip a lot of the early levels, but that's not really going to be a factor here. I'm not going to factor that in for the Demon Hunter either. But overall, I think that Death Knight is a pretty strong class. A really good choice if you want to level up a relatively easy character that'll give you a relatively easy leveling experience. And along with that, I'm also going to throw in the Druid. Now, I think Druid is one class that, even though I don't have it in the S tier, is probably one class that I will recommend more than any other class if you want to, especially like if you're a new player, or maybe you're not maybe you're not brand new, but you know, you kind of want to get a taste for everything. That's going to be the Druid, and the Druid is really easy to level up. You have a lot of options. Again, I leveled up as tank. I leveled up in bear form, and I had so much fun doing it that I just love playing bear form now. I don't know if I'm going to start tanking with it necessarily, but I just enjoy playing as a bear, especially like when you're out farming, because if you don't know this, when you're a tank, you can't get dazed. So if you're like running around like me on my bear, farming herbs, then I can switch to mount form and I won't get dazed. I can just run around farming. And so I tend to stay in bear form quite a lot. But a great thing about druids is they have a lot of variation. You have a lot that you can dip your toes in. I mean, they do literally everything in the game. They heal, they tank, they range DPS, they melee DPS, and they all are very different from one another. I mean, if you want to go boomkin, you can just run around and just, I mean, AoE things down like crazy. That's why boomkin are often preferred for, mob farming, if you're doing those, mob farming runs where you're just killing enemies and looting them for gold or for cloth or whatever. Boomkin's great for stuff like that because they're really good at doing that kind of thing. And then if you want to do what I did, which may be a little bit slower, but I mean, as a bear tank, I never had to worry about my health. I was able to take on anything. I was pulling large packs of enemies and just swiping them down. It maybe took a little bit longer, but it was just completely brainless. And that's kind of what I like when I'm leveling up characters. I don't want to have too much of a hassle like I was having with the mage, where I had to use all of my abilities just to try to kill one enemy. Sometimes it felt like, but as a druid, I didn't have to do that. I could just run in, never worry about anything, and mow things down. And so and then if you get bored with one spec, you can always switch to a different spec and mess around with that. So it's entirely up to you. So, I mean, Druid is probably one of my favorite classes in the game, and I was really surprised with how much I enjoyed it this time around, because in the past, because I would always stick with cat form, I'm not a big fan of cat form just because I don't like that style. It's more like a rogue. I think it's a little bit more fun than a rogue, but I still don't really enjoy that style. But the nice thing about cat form, and probably why I like it more than a rogue, is that you are able to heal, because as a druid you do have healing abilities, and you're able to kind of heal yourself through procs in cat form. So you are able to keep yourself healed up and really shouldn't have any downtime, which is kind of nice. So overall, I really enjoy the druid. I think it's a lot of fun. It's one class that I would probably recommend to a lot of people. It might be a little bit much at first if you're newer, because there's so much variation and choices in terms of what you can do. But it's definitely going to get you introduced to every aspect of the game in terms of how classes play. So Druid's a great option. It's not the absolute best or easiest, but it's definitely up there in terms of having a great leveling experience. So there you go. I'm going to also throw in this higher tier. Believe it or not, I'm going to throw in priests as well, because this is one that I was very surprised by. I didn't expect to have such a good leveling experience with priests. I'm actually still in the middle of leveling up my priests now, but what I've noticed is they're really freaking strong, and I didn't expect that. I thought priests was going to be the worst leveling experience, and that's why I held it off for last. But I've come to realize just by the time I've been messing with it more recently that, holy crap, they're really strong. And I'm leveling up as Shadow. You can also level up as Discipline. They're pretty good, but Shadow is much faster, and to my surprise, I rarely have to worry about my health. And that's not even when I'm having to heal and keep myself topped off. You're able to use your shield a lot to keep yourself from taking damage, and you just dot up enemies and go to town. Go in the void form and just erupt on everyone and just watch everything die really fast. It's crazy how powerful a Shadow Priest is. I don't know if I would say they're as good in terms of doing solo, group quests, especially those wanted quests, especially when you get into the higher levels. I'm not sure they're able to do that necessarily. So I wouldn't say they're as good as as a paladin for stuff like that, or even as a hunter, but you're able to just mow through normal quests without any trouble. You've got healing as an option, you've got good cooldowns to keep yourself from dying, that kind of thing, and you're just able to take down multiple enemies. You can just kind of keep going without stopping. And what's really crazy is in Battle for Azeroth, I never really felt like this before, but with the the void form this time around, I feel like I'm almost always in void form, which is fun. The more time I spend in void form, the more fun I'm having playing as Shadow Priest. It's just you can keep that momentum going, and it feels like it never really stops. And so Shadow Priest was a very unexpected delight this time around, and I really enjoyed myself leveling it up. So I'm actually looking forward to leveling up another Shadow Priest from like a low level. I'm going to be leveling up one to get my Light Forged Draenei Heritage armor, and I'm wanting to do a Shadow Priest, and I'm like really looking forward to doing that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, speaking of a very similar experience I had, another class I'm going to put here in the A slot will be Warlocks. Now, I was very tempted for a while to put Warlocks in S tier along with Hunters because I think they're really close to being as good, but I'm not going to do that just because of, you know, where things ended up with Warlocks. I was, again, very unexpectedly surprised by how much fun I had leveling up a Warlock. I chose Demonology. It is by far one of the most fun specs to play in the game, and I really enjoyed myself. I was able to do pretty much everything. I was able to take on, you know, elite packs or elite, you know, group quests that are out there in Battle for Azeroth. I was able to take on multiple enemies at once without very little trouble, but there were a lot of times where my demon pet was dying. I was switching between Felguard and Voidwalker, and even the Voidwalker at times was getting, you know, taken out relatively quick. So the good news is you can just summon him right back up, and you should be able to regain control of the enemies, but there were times where that didn't happen fast enough, and I got taken out. So unlike a Hunter, as a Warlock, you do wear cloth, so you do take damage a lot more. You die a little bit quicker, so you got to be quick to get yourself, you know, get things under control and keep yourself from dying. And then on the plus side, though, you can use like Health Stone, which Warlocks can create. You can use Soul Stone in case you die; it'll bring you back. Stuff like that. So you do have those options, but overall, it's, you know, it was a lot of fun. The thing about Demonology is, like, I think of Demonologies as the Sonic of World of Warcraft, because it's like when you play a game, like when you play Sonic the Hedgehog, it's all about momentum. It's all about keeping yourself going as fast as possible for as long as possible. As long as you're moving fast, the game is fun. But the moment that momentum gets broken and you stop, it suddenly becomes less fun. It's like a big, like, Debbie Downer in that game. It really kills the buzz, you know what I'm saying? So, like, with a Demonology Warlock, what you're doing is you're trying to keep up as many imps as possible. When you're proccing and you're throwing out as many Hands of Gul'dan as you possibly can, and you're summoning your demons, you know, it's really fun when you have a big army of imps following you around and you're just killing things. But when something happens that just kills that momentum, like you run out of enemies to fight, or you know, your demon pet dies, and suddenly you have to summon him back up, or you gotta like try to keep yourself from getting killed, and that momentum stops, it suddenly becomes a lot less fun. So you go from a really incredible high to a really incredible low, and that really kind of hurts the fun of it. But I mean, it's nice to have a little bit of a challenge, but that's, you know, it's all about building up that momentum and trying to keep that snowball going downhill as much as possible. So when that's happening, it's a lot of fun, but the moment that momentum gets broken, it suddenly becomes a little bit less fun. But that didn't stop it from being a really good leveling experience. If you wanted to level up a new character and you wanted to go with Warlock, it would not be a bad choice at all. It's definitely one of the better classes in my mind. So those are what I think are the really good classes. They're not S tier, but they're really great. Now let's talk about what is a little bit above average. Now, I think you've got a couple classes that you can throw in here. I'm going to say Monk is above average by far. Monks excel at everything that they do. They're really strong. They can do a lot of damage. I started off leveling up as Brewmaster, but I felt like it was a little bit too slow, and I was taking on a lot more damage than I was taking on with other tank specs like Druid and Paladin. But when I switched over to Windwalker, I was mowing down enemies, and it was a lot of fun. So I really enjoy the Monk class, the class fantasy. I would be able to take on maybe 2 or 3 enemies at a time. Nothing any bigger than that. If I did, it would get really dangerous really fast for me, and I really wasn't able to take on any elite packs, you know, for the dungeon or for the group quests, but I was still able to do pretty well with the normal quest and just mowing through it. So I thought Monk was a lot of fun. There isn't a whole lot to be said. Again, this is just slightly above average, but I think you'll have a slightly above average time. It won't be too difficult as long as you play smart. You will have to keep your eye on your health a little bit more because you are wearing leather, and that's just kind of, you know, a thing that you got to worry about. So, and then of course, kind of a similar experience is with the warrior. You do have 3 choices here. Warriors do wear plate, so you have a lot more damage that you can take, and pretty much every warrior spec has a way to regain health, even though they don't have a straight up heal. I leveled up as arms. I felt like it was the best. It was the best at self-healing. It really good at keeping me topped off. Never really had to worry about anything. I was able to take on some of the group quests by myself. It just depends on which one and what the mechanics were. But overall, I didn't really die. I've maybe died once or twice as a warrior. You gotta watch it sometimes, because if you really get low on health, you really get overwhelmed, it can really go bad for you quickly. I was kind of sad, because I normally like to level up as Fury, but I felt like Fury was a little bit weaker when it comes to leveling compared to arms. And then if you wanted to go prot, you probably wouldn't have that much trouble at all. Again, prot is very similar to Guardian or Bear Druid in terms of just you're able to do a lot more in terms of taking on more enemies, but you do move a lot slower. You kill things a lot slower. You can probably take on a few more packs, and it doesn't have the healing that druids have, so it's not as good when it comes to that. But overall, I thought Warrior was a pretty above average experience. Nothing super spectacular, but nothing terrible either. So it was pretty fun. And then the last one that I'm going to kind of put here would be the Demon Hunter. Now, Demon Hunter kind of surprised me. I thought I would have more fun with it than I did. It wasn't terrible. I mean, I was able to get through it pretty well. But I was a little bit let down in terms of just not having a lot of fun, not really performing exceptionally well. Maybe I'm just not a great demon hunter, but I mean, there are so few abilities to use. It's not like it's hard, especially if you go with the certain talents. I do recommend that if you're going to level up as a demon hunter, that you use metamorphosis as much as possible. You go with talents that will trigger metamorphosis, and then you have the ability where when you're in metamorphosis form, you're leeching, so that way you can heal yourself. Because, I mean, surprisingly, demon hunters can take on a good deal of damage. Now, I eventually switched over to Vengeance instead of Havoc, because Havoc is the DPS form of demon hunter, and when I switched over to Vengeance, which was the tank form, I did start having more fun, because it was a little bit slower, but I could take on a lot more enemies, and I could keep myself topped off a lot better. And so that was just my opinion, my experience, and I started having a lot more fun. I honestly leveled up my demon hunter a lot through skinning. I would go out and either kill the gorillas out in Zuldazar, or I would go over to Drustvar and kill the quill dudes, the little porcupine guys, and just farm skins for a long time. But once the market kind of collapsed with all that, it was kind of pointless, so I started leveling them up as normal. But I had a fun time. I didn't have as much fun as I thought. I wouldn't say that they're super exceptional, but they're probably above average. I mean, it shouldn't be too difficult to level up a Demon Hunter. But there's nothing really spectacular about them like there was in Legion. I felt like in Legion, Demon Hunters were really fun, and I think it was one of the first classes I leveled up. I thought about making it my main for a while, but now I just feel like they're just relatively average. So Demon Hunter, a little bit above average, but maybe not quite average, but a little bit above average, on the level of a monk and druid for sure, or warrior. So let's talk about the last two, which I think are average. So rogue and shaman are, in my opinion, average in terms of leveling. It's not the greatest time ever. It's not even really above average. It's pretty average. As a rogue, it's fun because you can stealth, you can skip past a lot of stuff when you're just trying to get somewhere on a quest. But, you can't take a lot of damage. You try to kill things as quickly as possible so that you don't take damage, and you CC when you need to. You stun things like crazy. They're definitely fun to play, but it just wasn't a great leveling experience in my mind. I wasn't having a whole lot of fun. I had to focus in a lot more, which sounds like you'd think that would be a more fun experience, but in a game like World of Warcraft, when you've leveled up so many characters, that kind of thing, you just want to get through it as quickly as possible and not put too much effort into it, I guess, especially when it comes to leveling. So as a rogue, I feel like I had to do that a lot more. I was getting annoyed at times because I was leveling up as combat, and I would use my buff, roll the bones, and then I'd have to rebuff because it'd be a minute before I fight another pack. So it was do I even bother buffing, or do I just use the damage ability with my combo points? Just that kind of stuff was kind of annoying just with leveling. I wasn't having as much fun with it as I was with other classes. I don't really like that that play style that much. It's really not for me, but I wouldn't say it's terrible. It was definitely a lot easier than the Mage. You do have some healing abilities in there that you can use to keep yourself topped off. It wasn't too much trouble, but overall, I just wasn't having a whole lot of fun with the Rogue. And it kind of can be said the same for Shamans. I think Shamans may be a little bit better than Rogue. I mean, I might be able to put Shamans in B and maybe slightly above average, especially like early on in BFA. Like, I feel like my Shaman was pretty powerful. I was taking on enemies pretty quickly, but that quickly stopped being a thing, and I was quickly getting outpaced by leveling up. I started feeling a lot weaker as things went on, and so kind of got frustrated at times with the Shaman, just because like I'm able to keep myself topped off, I'm able to heal up, which is nice. I'm glad Shamans have healing abilities, but overall, I just felt like I wasn't doing as much damage and having as much fun with the Shaman that I was having with other classes. There wasn't that gimmick or that thing that really set them apart. So overall, Shamans aren't going to be terrible. They're not going to be super great in my mind, but they're just relatively average. I wish that, they could do something to make Shamans, a lot more something. I don't know what it is. They're just an ingredient that I feel like is missing there that would make them a lot more fun. Like, I like the idea as a Shaman, just flinging elements everywhere, throwing rocks and fire and lightning all over the place. I think that's awesome. Like, visually speaking, Shaman is one of my favorite classes. They're fun to watch in combat with all the cool, spell effects that are happening. But as a class, playing it, I wasn't really super into it. It was fine, but it wasn't amazing. It wasn't blowing my socks off. And I wish that I could have done a little bit more damage, as levels were going, and as I was getting higher up into levels, I felt like I was just slowing down a little bit too much, in my opinion. So overall, that's what I think. That pretty much sums up. If you want to know what classes I think you can level up, this pretty much sums it up. I mean, you can level up any class, but I think you'll have an easiest time with Paladins and Hunters, and then if you want to go with something else, you've got a lot of options. So this is what I think. This is what I would recommend. I'm not going to tell you not to play any class. I recommend that you level up every class, but I'm an alcoholic. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it answered your questions in terms of, how I feel about each class in terms of leveling and their simplicity and their appeal, and especially in solo casual content. And so I hope this kind of answered those questions. I do apologize for my voice. I am a little bit sick still. I'm just getting over this cold, so my voice is a little bit hoarse, but I wanted to try to get this video out for you because I thought it would be a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button, and feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and if you'd like, you can support this channel on Patreon. Links to all of this can be found in the description below. This is Kephas. Until next time.